committee. And I'm glad that I'm just the moderator because Dr. Francisco left us with questions to be resolved. And fortunately, we have two distinguished panelists with us today. We have Professor Dr. Asma Ismail from USM. I'm sure she doesn't need introduction. And we also have Professor Dr. Azmi Omar, CEO, President and CEO of INSEAD. And perhaps we would like to hear from them how these big challenges that we have been hearing from the morning until today can be addressed through what they are doing at their respective institutions, both in terms of innovating the education process, as well as looking at Wakaf as a financing structure to support innovation. Because I think moving forward, when you look at the kind, we had a discussion in this morning about the need to relook at what kind of assets that can be supported by Wakaf. Because maybe in the past you need buildings, maybe in the past you need factories, but in the future, what drives economy could be intangible assets that nobody can touch. So how do you connect that to Wakaf? And how do you connect these intellectual assets to future of education? So perhaps I would like to invite Professor Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail to share your thoughts in this area.
Can I have the slides on, please? Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think the keynote speaker had already set the tone regarding Malaysian higher education, and we are supposed to be the provider of the solutions to some of the things that has been raised. So let me begin by saying that, as we have already noted, that the world is changing, and that the changes that is happening with the digital age, with the disruptive change created by Industry 4.0, the global economic crisis and globalization, all of that have basically created a disruptive change in higher education, and to the point that higher education needs to undergo change. And basically, Malaysian government, the Ministry of Higher Education, had basically redesigned the Malaysian higher education in order to be able to cope with the disruptive change. And basically, to answer the gentleman's question just now, at the end of the day, Malaysian higher education today is now creating, nurturing, learned, values-driven talent. Okay, it's no longer about just producing excellent students, but learned, values-driven talent that is holistic, that is entrepreneurial, and that is balanced. And balance here is balance between character and values and knowledge. Okay, and what it entails is that when it will mean, how do you measure this, is by integrated CGPA, as already mentioned by the keynote speaker, but it also means the creating of entrepreneurial mindset among the students, and the other one that is not touched is experiential learning or social learning, because it takes a whole village to educate a child. And it is not enough just to learn from the classroom. There is a lot of learning to be done in the community, to be learned in society. So experiential learning by means of community engagement is now also part and parcel of the higher education curriculum. And of course, the spirit of volunteerism is now all there as well. So at the end of the day, higher education, to answer about the coming of the robots and the Industry 4.0, whereby World Economic Forum says automation will lead to job losses that will impact both men and women equally, and that robots will take over repetitive jobs. So our answer when we design the higher education is basically to create job creators, not to create job seekers, as what the gentleman previously had alluded to. So that is already part and parcel of the training of the students in the future generation of the universities today in Malaysia. And today the minister had mentioned that for Wakaf, now to be second nature. We need now to nurture the students to be altruism, voluntarism, selflessness. Okay, all these are ideas. And I'm sure you in the audience, you're just wondering, how do we realize this? How do you put this into action? Because at the end of the day, the blueprint only gives us a framework. The real thing that is happening will be at the universities. How do the universities turn around, make that change? Otherwise, the thousands of students that's coming in and getting out of the universities will not undergo this change. So I would like to share our experience at University Science Malaysia. Vice Chancellors come, Vice Chancellors go. And this is where it's very important that as an apex, the only apex university in the country, we now make sure that the apex agenda of helping the people of the poor enhance their social well-being, having values like quality, equity, availability, accessibility, affordability, appropriate to the culture of the people, and trust like knowledge, future-oriented, unique, sustainable, humanity, universality, change, sacrifice, wellness, all that is institutionalized. So this is how, because you can have vice chancellors that have perancangan strategic directions of the university, and that goes in and out, and there's no permanency. So in USM, we make sure that this is now institutionalized as part of the constitution of the university, and also now this is also the policies that is now unlocked in the university, so that there is sustainability of what is happening in the university towards this aspect. And the question then is that if we have all these values that we are talking about, how now do you inculcate sustainability agenda among the students? And one way that we do this is by looking at, if you look at Shift 1 itself, it will say holistic, entrepreneurial, and balanced graduate, and that would mean at the ministry is HEB. But in USM, we add two more, hebat, A and T, which is articulate and thinking graduate as well. So what this means is that we will now create a new one that is a hebat index that had altruism there, that had voluntarism there, selflessness there, leadership and everything else. So all this is now inculcated in this hebat index. So at the end of the day, we have the integrated CGPA, which now also need to comply to MQA, but we also now have this added intangible, which is hebat index that we are now, and this is a non-credit thing that we'll want to make sure that we monitor our students to do that. Why? Why? Because in the era of Industrial 4.0, there is now among all of us this technology addiction. None of us can leave home without the handphone. And basically among the connected, if we do not watch out, there is going to be a technology takeover. And therefore what we need is that we keep on seeing what's happening now, is that the more connected you are, the more lonely you become with less and less human interaction. And therefore, that is why we tell the students there is a need to get and connected back to humanity. And how do we connect to humanity is by community engagement. Because we feel that experiential learning, social learning is very much now in vogue, and this is now happening all over. Australia now starts talking about social learning. Canada is now talking about social learning. So this is something that we have already inculcated in our curriculum. And this exposure to other religion, to other cultures, to various socio-economic environments are all essential, basically to nurture what? To nurture tomorrow's broad-minded, adaptive, flexible thinkers that can now cope with the changes that is now happening. And therefore, we will strive at USM to produce students who are not only knowledgeable, but with values and also caring, which is the CULT. And this is also in line with the SDGs. And basically, we do not stop there. There is a need for tomorrow's student to also be global-minded. And therefore, we expand program now to include USM, one passport, one student, so that they now need to go overseas before they can graduate. They have to spend at least 1 week overseas, not to have fun, but to actually have a project and community engagement, some of the community overseas, because you need to be locally engaged as well as provide solutions to the global world. And therefore, we now use this as part and parcel of Wakaf. We use the concept, help us to help others. So if you are a philanthropist and you have the money, you don't have the number of people to do the job. We have the students, we have the capacity to be able to do. So the philanthropists actually now give us some money and the wakaf to be able to do this. So this is how we use the wakaf concept. And we have expanded this to basically create what we call APUSEN, Asia Pacific Community Engagement Network. And basically now, with this concept, we find that there's a lot more universities that share the same vision to be able to help people. And now we have 93 universities from around the world, from 19 countries. And this concept has basically gone beyond the Asia Pacific. So we talk about wakaf, but in actual fact, there's a lot of people who wants to help. It's just that they don't know how to begin. And this is now when we have the same shared vision, we now begin to see that this is happening big time. And UNESCO now has recognized USM as the preferred university for community engagement. And this time we will now be chairing and be able to do the training for Knowledge for Change, or K4C. And basically, this is how, ladies and gentlemen, we touch base with humanity so that the students now begin to understand culture, religion, and all that, and create opportunity. Only when you are down in the community, you see what the people want, can you now create innovations that is now relevant. Also, if you're talking about entrepreneurial mindset, this is the time of teaching the students about opportunity, to see an opportunity to be able to create a relevant innovation that can now essentially be commercialized. And because they're already in the global setting, it allows them, if in the future they want to do any form of business or even for research purposes, the networking is already established. So when we start to do that, ladies and gentlemen, that is only then can we say to the students, I am USM by design. And this is how we want to do it for the future, especially for the future generation for Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Datuk. There was a very short but comprehensive response to the whole discussion that we had today about innovation, the need for university to respond, and how wakaf can be incorporated as part of the answer. I would like to invite Dato, Dr. Azmi for your response to the questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, can I get my presentation up there? I have a few slides to share. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First, Mr. Chairman, fellow speaker, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank the organizer, Mohd in this case, for inviting me. I'm still new in the Malaysian higher education. I just came back late last year and took over as the president of INCF, still learning about the Malaysian education scenario after having been away for the last 6 years. I used to work in the Islamic Development Bank, managing one of the subsidiaries on these, looking at the Islamic finance research training, as well as technical assistance on Islamic finance. And some of the people here have also been involved with me, especially in helping to develop wakaf particularly. So now coming back to the subject matter that we are talking about, let me just go back to the slide concerned. Okay, you see, INCF was established in 2005 by Bank Negara Malaysia as a wakaf university. It is unlike public universities where the areas are large. Ours is focusing mainly in the context of Islamic finance. So it's a very focused university looking at the development of talents in Islamic finance. But before I go into that, let me share with you in the context of the disruptive changes. What are the skills needed in the future? And Francisco earlier on alluded to this kind of skills. So if you look in 2015, the kind of skills are complex problem solving, coordinating with others, people management, critical thinking, negotiation, quality control, service orientation, judgment and decision making, active learning, creativity. And now in 2020, the skills required, top 10 skills, this is from the World Economic Forum, complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. Then the question would be, as a university, how do you respond to this requirement in the future? Are we going to use the same old pack, the round pack, to fit into the square hole, as being alluded by earlier speakers? Or are we going to change? And in INCF particularly, it is very acute. Why? As I said, very acute the issue is, we are very focused university, producing talents for Islamic financial services industry. Of course, if you look globally, Islamic finance industry has been growing from, I would say, from Asia Pacific right until South America. In my work in IDB, Islamic Development Bank, we provide assistance to many countries. The most recent one is, can you guess it? Suriname in South America. Suriname, where there are many Javanese there. It is a country, small country, that used to belong to Dutch, but they have already started in December last year an Islamic bank. Okay, so you have that span from Asia Pacific right until South America. Of course, the industry is expanding. Okay, the assets are expanding. Now it's about 2.5 trillion Islamic finance asset. Growth rate double digit. But however, if you look in the context of the future, even in Malaysia, the banking industry is growing, yet the number of employees in the banking industry, or what we call the financial services industry, is shrinking. Why? Mainly due to automation. You don't have any more service counters. What you have is all online banking. So the challenge for us would then be, how then we address this issue? Okay? But at the same time, bear in mind that we have fintech and technology are now the norms in the financial services industry. Jobs are no longer available, especially the financial analysts, credit analysts, customer relations. Specialized jobs, however, are still in demand. Risk management, treasury, data analytics, and so on. But at the same time, one important component is global halal industry. Halal industry is expanding. Estimated value now is about $8 trillion. And it is growing even faster than Islamic banking and Islamic finance. So then the question would be, how do we address this issue? So what we're doing now, as being a new person, as we said, new kid in the block, I look at the global scenario and look at the Malaysian scenario. Therefore, we decided to focus or refocus on still Islamic finance, but the focus is on producing talents who will be using Islamic finance for the global halal industry. Islamic finance is a subset of banking industry, subset of the halal industry. So what we are doing is that we are changing and turn around by saying that we will produce graduates, but those graduates will be working in the halal industry and will be using Islamic finance for the halal industry. So that requires us to look at all the courses that we are offering, at the same time looking at new courses that we are going to offer. So that's one. Secondly, being a postgraduate university, because we only have 2 master's programs and 1 PhD, we're changing our students to become a consultant or consultants. And we are using action-based learning, which means that from day one that they join us, we have already signed up about 25 institutions, including banks, IT companies. Those companies, those banks will be giving us the actual problems they face. Then we'll be using our students to solve those problems and give practical solutions to the companies. So in these ways, we are bringing the experiential learning into the classroom, into the company. And this is done every semester. First semester, it will be done in Malaysia. Second semester, those students will be doing outside the country. So in this way, they'll be solving problems of Malaysian companies, and later on, they'll be solving problems in another country, say, for example, Pakistan or India, and so on. So this is one of the ways that we are doing to take into account the future challenges. The third thing we are putting in place, as being mentioned, we want to change students from employees into entrepreneurs. But being a financial school, we are focusing more on the fintech applications. So fintech will be part of our curriculum, blockchain technology will be part of our curriculum, hence students will be involved in developing applications for the halal industry, not only financial services industry. And fourth, another aspect that we look at in order to get our students to meet up the fourth industrial revolution, that is the disruptive technology, is putting in place the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, there are 17 SDGs, and students must be well exposed to these SDGs. The issue of sustainable, the issue of engagement, the issue of poverty, because as you know, one of the first goals of SDGs is ending poverty. So how do you then use Islamic finance to solve poverty issue? So we will be looking at that perspective, taking into account the 17 SDGs and how our curriculum can help to answer some of those goals. And finally, the issue of innovative wakaf. As I mentioned earlier on, INSEAF is established by Banagara under wakaf university status. Although we did not call wakaf back then, but we are moving to call ourselves the fund as a wakaf fund. There are many universities, if you look in particularly in Turkey, there are many wakaf universities. So we are one of the first universities in Malaysia that is run purely on wakaf, because Banagara created the wakaf fund, and this wakaf fund is used to finance our activities. But then, if you study, as being mentioned by the Honorable Minister this morning, as well as Sultan Nazrin, if you take the case of Harvard, 13,000 alumnus provide monthly endowment to the university. It's not the large corporation, it's the individual graduates. So that's one important element that we have to remember. It's not large corporation that give 5 million, 10 million. It's the individuals who give every month $10, $20. You know, sikit-sikit lama-lama jadi bukit, that concept. So we are looking at that particular concept, component. The other one, as being mentioned also by my friend, the 3M, here. Similarly, we are creating small components. We will have desks, chairs under wakaf. We will have rooms under wakaf. So everything that we are going to do will be put under wakaf. And this wakaf will be open not only to individual students who can make wakaf. Don't think students are poor. Some of them are well off. Our employees, our partners, and others to the public. How to do that? We're going to work through the concept of financial technology, using fintech, crowdfunding as a platform for people to give wakaf to INSEAF. As we know, the millennials are more focused on financial technologies rather than the senior individuals like some of us here. So we are then going to use this crowdfunding platform to create wakaf, in small component wakaf in INSEAF. But bear in mind, although we may create wakaf all over, but one of the things that, in my experience, through working in IDB, is the issue of trust and validation. You may create wakaf, but how do you know the money is actually used for its intended purposes? Hence, you need a third party to validate that. Okay, a third party validation to ensure, to report that yes, this money has been created through wakaf and it is actually used for the purpose that it is intended for. So we will also create that, the governance framework, to ensure that the wakaf that is being developed in INSEAF will be fully transparent, will have validation report, will have the governance framework. I think in this way, the issue of trust and transparency hopefully will be resolved for the, as we said, the wakafers, people who are willing to support and give money for the institutions. That's my contribution. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dato. Okay, the questions are starting to come, but before I ask the question that are posed by the audience, I would like to perhaps want to ask a few questions to the panelists. Dato, Professor Asma, I think that Dato Azmi talks about, he mentioned about Harvard, where alumni is contributing on an annual basis, and that kind of way INSEAF is moving forward by getting the society to people from the society to come and support in terms of wakaf. So in the context of the new education blueprint, where it covers a lot of areas that has been discussed today, what do you see the role of the society at large in terms of supporting universities? Because of course, when you ask about what they expect from universities. There's a lot of expectation. But when it comes to what would be the kind of role that you expect them to help you to meet the expectation? So can you touch a bit on that?
Thank you. I think that's a very good question to ask. I find that when the university remains as an ivory tower, nobody really knows what the university is doing. When we start to be different, that we now reach out to society, we now ask the question, how can higher education help you? So now the society, by means of a lot of communication, now starts to get engaged. And when we start to do that, they want to find out more. And so far, what I'm seeing is that with the community engagement projects, I find that a lot of the people, they have the money, they just do not know what to do and how to begin to help others. And because they don't have the manpower, but they have their own individual, they have some money to spare. So that's how we come up with the idea of, we got students, we make it as part and parcel of the integral part of the parcel of the program for them to be able to graduate. And therefore now we propose all these projects, and now they now come in to help by giving, okay, how much do you need? And maybe it's not from one person, maybe it's from a group of people who now comes back to help, and they now begin to see, and the evaluation is themselves because they want to see the outcome of the project itself. So that is one way we see. And alumni is also now coming in, and alumni are also entrepreneurs, and they give back in the sense that now we have this concept CEO faculty, and alumni, successful alumni now come back and be able to teach the students, become role models to allow now the students to be able to see, if they can do it, so can I. And so there are many ways now that we are engaging the alumni to also be able to come in. So society is coming in, alumni is coming in, next stop, industry. Industry is such that you need to now be able to touch base with industry as well. And once they start to, what do I say? I say now to the industry, the concept of micro-credentials, now we can offer the concept of earn and learn. So when they're doing this, the industry now likes it very much because they don't have to lose any of their workforce, but at the same time now, they are learning while they are working and improving themselves. And as you know, gig economy is here to stay, and so there's a lot of things that need to be done. So micro-credentials now is another way that we are doing in order to be able to touch base society for the lifelong learners and also for the people in the workforce so that they can now improve themselves.
So the society has to assist you so that universities can develop and produce graduates who can contribute and address the needs of the society.
That's right.
Dr. Azmi, you mentioned about the banking industry. It's growing, but the number of employees are shrinking. So how do you see the role of universities in providing support for those who are displaced with innovation? Do you see a role that you can play in that respect?
Obviously, I think if you look at those people who are displaced by the disruption in the financial services industry, it would also depend on the kind, at the age where they are displaced. I think reskilling, of course, is an important thing that we need to do, but then the question is, reskilling at what age? Certain levels, yes, you can do quite easily, especially people who are below 40s, but above 40, it may be quite difficult to reskill them in certain areas. Because, for example, if you look at the application of fintech in financial services industry, I think banks are facing big challenges. Fintech companies are eating up the businesses of banks. You know, one of the key things, income of the bank is the remittances, for example. And now it's done by fintech companies at a very cheaper rate. You don't need to go. And even in a number of countries, you have a virtual bank. You don't need to go to a bank to have a banking account. For example, in UK, you have already about 6 virtual banks. Everything is done through online. You open a banking account online. You do all the transactions all online without having even to meet any human being. So just imagine the implications to this. So yes, the requirement would be people who are involved in the big data, data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. These are the kind of things that are required. But can we reskill certain individuals? I would say that again, it has to go back to the, for example, in our curriculum to ensure that it must incorporate this so that people will not, even if they are, let's say, to be laid off in future, they will be able to learn through this micro-learning, having micro-programs. And this is also we are doing through massive online open course in different aspects of Islamic finance and specialized program in order to give them additional skills. But just to add further on the issue of community engagement, again, since my work in IDB, we did a lot on the integrated Islamic microfinance. So here, I'm also implementing soon, in June, just maybe after Ramadan, where we want to showcase that, yes, Islamic finance, universities in Islamic finance, has a solution, we have a solution to solve the poverty issue. So we are starting a program with Rohingya refugees, implementing integrated Islamic microfinance program. Integrated Islamic microfinance program, which means that you are using zakat, you're using wakaf, using sadaqah to help resolve the issue of poverty among refugees through integrated Islamic microfinance. For example, for the capacity building part, we'll be using zakat and sadaqah. But for the financing part, we'll be using wakaf as a component. So again, applying the concept of Islamic finance, the religious instruments of Islamic finance, to become an economic financial instrument, to be able, to bring people out of poverty, and particularly we have huge refugee numbers in Malaysia, and this is the thing that we also need to address. So this is the part of INSEAF that we're going to do to engage with the community.
Okay, now let's take some of the questions from the floor. There's a question here about does the introduction of wakaf aims to reduce the cost of education? If yes, please provide ideas how to mitigate the cost of education using wakaf. Is that the purpose of wakaf?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we can now move wakaf, there's a lot of things. It's just that there is a need for people to understand when you wakaf something is for what. If you say wakaf general, then there's a lot of things that university can now use to help subsidize the operationals, help subsidize a lot of things. But if the wakaf is very specific, then there's not much that we can do about it. So it is a mindset change that we need to have. And I think it is very timely that we have this wakaf revival so that we can now be able, the masyarakat, the community, especially in Malaysia, can now be able to see what are, there are plan B, plan C, plan D, the ways of interpreting how wakaf, the innovative wakaf can now be done. And once that happens, I think this will be the third funding economy that we will now be able to need and be able to move university, for sure. But we need a mindset change. We need a mindset change in two things. One among the community, the other one, Majlis Agama Islam, also need to have a mindset change in this aspect so that we can now move the innovative way.
If I can add to that. See, if you take historically, and you may not know this, in Azhar University previously, the donkey that takes the Sheikh Azhar from his house to the university is a wakaf donkey. Just imagine what it means simply, the transport that is provided to the Sheikh of the university, Sheikh Al-Azhar, is a wakaf, not his own personal vehicle, and many other things. So what we're saying is that this is nothing new in Islamic history. You go to Turkey today, there are a number of universities that are based on wakaf. You even have a wakaf bank in Turkey. And I know our friends in Indonesia are also preparing to establish a wakaf bank in Indonesia. Wakaf Islamic Bank. Although in Turkey it's a conventional wakaf bank, but they are planning to establish, and in fact they have established a wakaf Islamic bank, run purely on wakaf. So what we're saying is that wakaf, yes, you have a commercial institution, a bank, you have universities, but then the question would be, how do we then change that mentality? So one is, of course, creating that awareness in Malaysia, not only among the publics, but also among the religious authorities. Sometimes I used to make a joke, we tend to focus more on the dead in Malaysia rather than those who are alive. The zakat money that we collect every year, we pay for the kereta janazah, which is more important for the janazah or for the education of the young people. See, think about that. We collect money to build more cemeteries, graveyard, tak cukup. Why? People don't have houses in Malaysia. Why don't you create wakaf money to build houses for people, for poor people, rather than for people who have died? Okay? For those people who have died, then we should be more creative. Looking at Saudi, I've been in Saudi for 6 years. The cemetery there, after 5 years, is recycled. The bones are taken and put in one large cemetery, one large grave. So that every few years, that grave is being used. So in this way, we talk about maqasid al-Sharia to help the universities to create more wakaf. But we have to change our mindset. And this is the important part. The awareness, the mindset, then make it more easy for people to create wakaf. Wakaf need not be big. It can be only $10, but you can break down those wakaf into various needs of the university. So in that way, the cost of education is reduced. Why? Because don't think the responsibility of the government alone to provide education. It's the public sector, the government, the private sector, and the third sector, which is the individuals based on wakaf. Think about that. Thank you very much.
I want to add one more. If we have this wakaf funding mechanism happening, R&D in this country will be able to flourish. Right now, we are so dependent on the government grants that and then we go to the industry. But there's a lot more that we can do for society in terms of diseases, in terms of cancer, in terms of whatever that we need for the future if we have more R&D funds. And this is where I think if wakaf money, I mean at USM we created a yayasan and we have there even wakaf for research. But there are not very many companies nor even individuals who would like because of this mindset change needs to be there. But for research, wakaf, no. But wakaf should be for community, for benefit of this and that. So this is where I'm saying R&D at the end of the day will be able to benefit society more in the future. So I hope that the mind, that's why I say it's very timely to use the word wakaf revival, because I think this is the time that we now need to undergo the kind of change in the thinking that what this wakaf fund is all about.
I like the way INSEF is approaching wakaf, where instead of having a big asset to be funded, you disaggregate the assets, making it smaller so that it's easier for people to fund and it's clearer for them to know what the funding was for. So I suggest perhaps maybe instead of looking at a big structure where you are seen to be rather ambitious, perhaps having smaller portion and smaller amount may help, and especially in R&Ds, for example, if there are certain projects that are very attractive, maybe it's easier.
That's why we have projects, community projects that is R&D based to be able to help.
All right, so I think we have come to the end of the day. I know we had a bit extended session, but perhaps if you look at it from the value point of view, you get more than what you bargained for. And I think we should thank our panelists for their very good ideas, very good explanation about how to move forward, not just with technology, but also about humanity and using wakaf as a supporting structure.
Thank you very much. Can we have, once again, Tan Sri, Dr. Nurulno on stage, the Secretary General of the Ministry. Presentation first to the Vice Chancellor of USM, Professor Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail. Next, Professor Dato Dr. Azmi Omar, the President and Chief Executive Officer, International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, INSEF. And to Nik Muhammad Hasyudeen Yusoff, Director, Innovastra Capitals Berhad, Malaysia. Can we have a group photo, please? Come forward. Sincerely, a very special thank you to everyone. I'm very, very honored to see all of you sitting down, 20 minutes extra from the goodbye time. Thank you. Terima kasih semua.